Your Lending Era, the podcast where we dive into the world of residential, business and commercial finance, bringing you expert insight, tips and strategies to help you navigate the intricate landscape of lending in Australia. I'm one of your hosts, Jessica, and in today's episode, we are chatting all things mistakes, the creme de la creme of applications gone wrong, unfortunately. Here with me today, we have Dave and Hope.
Hey, Jess. Hey, Dave.
Jess, how are
Hi,
you?
guys. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, really fun one today.
I was going to say, I'm just a little bit anxious about this, but...
Get a bit personal. Okay, so it's fair to say, guys, we've seen every single item on the list that we're going to be discussing today happen within our own office, and generally they come from another broker or another bank, and we kind of have to go in there and just do the Band-Aid solution, which ends up being the best solution anywho.
Yeah.
But what would you say is kind of the number one way these issues start to occur?
I think the number one thing is that people are extremely underprepared.
Yes.
Yeah. And ill-equipped.
Yeah.
And where the scenario that I have seen the biggest pickles have come from people that have woken up on a Saturday morning and gone to auction and bought a property and then gone, I should just sit on this for 3 weeks and then I'll go and try and get finance at literally the 11th hour. And then that puts a lot of pressure on us as brokers to try and meet settlement and get things organised when we know nothing about this person or their financial situation or their borrowing capacity or any of those types of things. But, when you've purchased a property at auction and you're liable for your 10% and we need to complete settlement. Otherwise it's going to be, that client's going to be in a world of pain.
And it's and tread just as carefully with off the plans.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I actually had a lovely young girl come into my office one day for a meeting, and she walked in with the contract and her pay slips, and she said, my solicitor has said I need to settle up on Friday. And I was like, it's Tuesday.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is a 2 month job, right? And we've got 4 days. I said, where did you, how do we get to this point where you were coming in the week of settlement? She said, well, when I bought my car, I gave them my pay slips on the Monday and I got my finance approved and I picked it up before the weekend.
Oh, bless her.
And I'm like, okay, well, that's the only bit of finance that you've had to do.
Yeah.
This is slightly different, but I can see where you got that kind of sense and that idea that it's just some finance and it should all be fine.
Yeah.
So get prepared, understand that this is a different type of finance that you're trying to achieve and it's going to have a lot of different, moving parts and a lot of different timeframes that maybe you're not prepared for.
Yeah.
And as we've discussed in multiple podcasts before, the what happened in lending previously is now not what happens in lending.
Yeah.
So if your last loan application got approved in a week, don't assume that that's going to happen.
No.
If your last loan application got approved on one pay slip, don't assume that that's going to happen. If your last loan application got approved without having to supply all your bank statements and all that kind of stuff, don't assume that that's going to happen.
Yeah,
right?
And it's ever changing, and we've spoken about that a lot too, is that, the lending landscape is different all the time.
Yeah.
So just really keep that in mind and don't just, enter into anything where you're financially liable for a lot of money without getting that advice first.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now we're going to go through there's about 6 items that Dave and Hope are going to talk us through here, but as a very brief caveat at the start, there is generally a way to avoid every single one of these problems occurring. Isn't there? There is a way around all of these things.
Yeah.
And traditionally it is being open and honest and prepared.
Yeah, exactly right. And if you guys listen to one of the first or second podcasts that we did, my own experience is to make sure that you have a pre-approval organised and it's valid at the time that you purchase based off your current financial situation being accurate, that the lender has said, yes, that's great. If you go and purchase a property to the value of X amount, then we're happy to, as long as the, subject to evaluation and a few other little things, we're happy to offer you that finance. I think that is, if you're looking to enter into the market for the first or 10th time or whenever it is, you need to have a valid pre-approval at the time.
So that's kind of the first place that you see things go wrong traditionally is just not having a valid pre-approval.
Yeah. And I remember my mind flashes back to that podcast, and the secondary one was an appropriate pre-approval.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think we discussed in that podcast, if you have, you're a dual public servant family with a 50% deposit, a system-generated pre-approval is going to be appropriate. If you are self-employed and you have a company and a trust and self-employed tax returns and you've got plant and equipment in there, a system-generated pre-approval is not what you need. You need a fully assessed by a human pre-approval that have looked through your tax returns, have looked through your P&L, and they've looked through all of your finance and equipment statements, and they're giving you a rock-solid pre-approval that is just subject to that security being acceptable by the bank.
And even if your situation's not that complex, I would much prefer a first home buyer with a 5% deposit that hasn't obtained credit before to have more of a solid pre-approval, because we really don't know anything about their credit history. And sometimes the system-generated pre-approvals sort of skim over a lot of things. And when there is so much money on the line, we want to make sure that if they do go to auction in the weekend, that they are going to be able to obtain finance.
Okay, so first biggest mistakes we see is not having a valid or appropriate pre-approval.
Yep.
You can easily overcome that by simply getting some advice and making sure you have an appropriate pre-approval that is currently valid.
And off the back of that, there are some pre-approvals that are valid for 3 to 6 months. And there's a lot of things that can happen in life in 6 months, and sometimes, not every time, but sometimes if someone has had something significantly change in that time, they actually don't, or they just forget
to disclose
that to us, and that can actually turn your pre-approval belly up once you have purchased something and you come back to us and say, I changed jobs, or I'm pregnant, or whatever might be the case, and we don't, and then we've got to sort of figure out how we're going to mitigate that with the lender, because they haven't based their pre-approval, that assessment off those things at the time.
Yeah, and that segues into the next one, that is making changes to your situation during a purchase cycle. So try not to make any changes. So, and when I say changes, I mean taking out new car loans, taking out new credit cards, also changing jobs, turning to be self-employed, going from a PAYG role to a contract role, changing jobs in the same organisation whereby you used to have a high base and now you've got a lower base but some form of bonus, right? Because when we get to the stage where we actually need to get the unconditional approval, they may ask for your updated pay slips, and if they're not identical to what you had before, we're going to be in a pickle. So don't change your circumstances. And if you do need to change circumstances, talk to your broker or talk to your bank and say, hey, this is the change that has to happen. Is this going to have an impact? Because some things don't have an impact. If you've got, quite a bit of surplus in your servicing calculation that we've looked at, and your new car that you ordered 12 months ago has arrived, it may not impact things at all, right? But we need to know. Don't hope to sweep it under the carpet, because if it comes up at the 11th hour, it could even if it's not a problem, it could cause a problem or a delay. So communicate early on any and all changes.
And just trying to make sure that you're really upfront about imminent debts, like the car that you ordered 12 months ago, car leases, things like that. We've had 1 million people try and conceal pregnancies to us, which I just find so funny, because, and we've spoken about this in other podcasts, that we see bank statements, we can put the pieces together very quickly. Obviously, having a baby can change so much of your financial situation, that we just really want people to be upfront and honest with us, so that we can, just because the lender's probably going to find out themselves, even if we don't tell them, and they will factor all those things in. So if we are on the front foot and we can build a plan to make it all work with the lender, they'll be happy with that. But I feel like a lot of people maybe obtain bad advice and they get the wrong idea about, maternity leave and having dependents and serviceability and all these different things. But you need to be upfront and honest and have those conversations with your broker so that we make sure that, once you have purchased a property or, achieve whatever it is you're hoping to do, that you don't put yourself in a pickle when you are on mat leave.
Okay, so capping off 2 and 3, which were not making changes, or actually where it goes wrong is when you do make changes to your financial circumstances and you're potentially not disclosing other things in your life.
Yeah.
And again, the workaround for that is, like David said, communicate, be transparent.
Yeah.
If you don't tell us, sadly, we probably will find
We'll
out. And then
know.
it's an awkward phone call and everyone feels weird. So just be open and honest. You know, we're all in the room trying to get the same outcome for you at the end of the day.
We're on the same team.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So, and then the next one that I would roll into is probably directorships and being
We see this all the time.
Yeah.
and being affiliated with family businesses and also ABNs.
Yeah.
Being used or not used, you know, side hustles that have liabilities.
You
all of
love
these-
bringing up the side hustle
a
thing.
side hustle that has liabilities is a killer.
Yeah.
So I think it's that disclosure piece. You know, having a look at, you know, what entities you're listed as a director on and disclosing all of those.
Yeah.
Any ABNs that you have, disclosing all of those, because they're things that most people have forgotten all about. But even if it's as simple as, oh yeah, look, I do have a side hustle, I do have an ABN, I haven't even used it, and we've got to go and get an accountant's letter.
Yeah.
And the accountant's letter takes a week to get.
Yeah.
That causes a delay.
Yeah.
So, and a week can be really stressful when they've already called settlement on your off-the-plan apartment.
Yeah.
You know, and you're looking at penalties at
Yeah.
11% calculated on a daily basis or whatever. So, so disclose all these things and disclose them early because they can really cause some significant delays that cause cost.
And
Yeah.
it comes back to that piece whereby if you do not disclose something to a bank, traditionally they err on the side of caution and say you're trying to hide something.
Yeah.
Not
and-
that this was an honest mistake.
Yeah, and I think that just going back to the directorship thing, I think people do conceal that because they don't realise that it's as simple as just obtaining an accountant's letter to say that it's trading profitably and meeting all its current liabilities or commitments, and that's
Yeah.
literally all the bank wants to see.
In some cases, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're a 50% director and owner of a fruit and veggie stand, they probably want a bit more.
Yeah,
But,
probably.
you know, but if it's just a sole trader ABN
Yeah.
or an old company that stopped trading in 2018,
Well, for the
It's an
side
easy
hustle
fix.
thing, like, you know,
Yeah.
normally we don't have to obtain too
no,
much.
it's just common sense there.
Yeah, so it's better to be upfront and honest about it, you know, so that we know, because the bank's going to see it on your credit file.
Yeah. Oh, another one where the resolve is simply being upfront
And
about it
honest,
and
yeah.
knowing what you have going on. Like it's as simple as just looking at your own kind of credit file. It'll tell you what your directorships are right there and then.
Yeah, and it's so easy to obtain your credit file, and so many
Yeah.
people don't realise that either.
No. Okay, swinging on into the next one.
So, you know, as far as trying to obtain finance, you need to have all your ducks in a row.
Yes.
And if you are serious about doing that, living, you know, very frivolously is probably not the best idea when you're trying to show the lender that you're a responsible borrower, that you are managing your money well when you're about to obtain a lot more debt.
Yeah, the biggest debt potentially of your life.
Yeah, so we probably need to cut back on unnecessary spending. I don't think we need to be going out and, you know, spending a lot of money on restaurants and entertainment and different things. I would sort of wind that back for 3 months before we wanted to move forward and put in any kind of application, because high living expenses cut into your serviceability, your borrowing capacity significantly.
Yeah, and I think it goes as well to speak to your character, whereby you're not going to just stop spending money when you buy the house. You don't want to put yourself in a financial pickle either.
No, you don't. You want to be responsible with
Yeah.
your money and, you know, make sure that you are, you know, you're the best at this, Jess. I've never seen anyone do this. But you manage your money effectively, set your meal plans, like, you know, make some meals at home, make your lunches, things like that.
And it doesn't have to be, like, no one's telling you that you can never go out and have a cocktail at Tipsy Bull ever again, although you can't. But, you know, that's not what we're saying. It's just simply being organised, being a bit of an adult about the situation.
But I would much rather a client rip that Band-Aid early than, you know, live it very luxuriously leading up to a purchase and then be like, oh, we've got to make a mortgage commitment this month and we can't afford to do all these things. It's hard to wind that back.
And quite often I've explained to a client when we sit there in the boardroom and we go through a debt servicing calculator and I put in the living expenses and they both look at each other and go, yeah, but we won't do that once we've got the new home loan. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not how a bank sees it.
No.
A bank sees that whatever you have spent is what you are going to spend in the future.
Yes.
So they're going to need, under their responsible lending, to put that in the calculation. And I can't write, we can't have a letter from mum and dad to say, they're good kids and they're going to be responsible once they get this home.
They've been spending money pretty recklessly, but not now.
The bank doesn't care. The responsible lending is whatever your living expenses are, that goes in the servicing calculator. That's it. So, there you go.
Beautiful. And the final one that I think this is definitely where we traditionally get clients come to us with this problem already happening and no one else has been able to help them.
And sometimes this just kind of comes out of the woodwork at application time. And what we're talking about is a default jumping on a credit file or a previous bankruptcy. And quite often, because these stay on the credit file for 7 years, it may be 2 or 3 years since a client's gone for a loan of any description, and maybe the default jumped on a couple of years ago, and it's not until we click the submit button or do a credit file prior to submission that this comes to light. Or they've clicked the submit button with a different broker or a different bank and it's come to light, and now they're in a mad scramble, and then that's why they've come to us.
There's nothing more soul-destroying as a broker than lodging an application and getting that instant decline.
Yeah, it's within 30 minutes. They do a quick credit file search and they can see it.
Yeah.
And it's just a no straight away unless you mitigate it.
Yeah. And sometimes we can get it overturned for different reasons and dependent on the loan to value ratio. But we would much prefer to know about these things before clicking submit.
And there's still options, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's non-conforming lenders that have a lot of, favourable policy around people with not so much bankruptcies, but defaults and things like that. They understand that things happen and, they want to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
And most times, though, you will need that default paid.
Yeah.
It can't be outstanding.
No.
You would still need to have that cleared up, and obviously your interest rate and fees will be higher at those lenders.
Yeah, to allow for that.
Yeah, but I mean, even if that gets you a foot in the door, then we can refinance you a couple of years later to a mainstream lender when that default has gone, and then happy days from there. You're back on track.
And lending in the bankruptcy space, I've seen it a few times, but it's not very regular. I think that is because generally people understand when they've been bankrupt, it's just not an option for a while.
Yeah.
But what would your general advice be to someone who, for example, went bankrupt in January of 2020?
So
I wouldn't.
Yeah, that's usually about knowing when the bankruptcy is going to be discharged, right? And getting the background story behind that.
Correct.
And then taking that to an appropriate lender that will lend to that person with all the disclosure and all of the backstory, and that they accept that borrower has, seen hard times, and they know that they are a temporary lender.
Yes.
So they know that they are lending for a period of time until that person can move on to a mainstream lender. So in any instances where we have done this in the past, there's some conversations about, rate, fees, charges. Is this even applicable? Or is this a good idea for that applicant? If it turns out that it is, then we move forward with it.
Yeah.
But there's a whole advice piece whether it is in their best interest to pursue a purchase and to borrow money in that set of financial circumstances.
Yeah. If it's like you're about to lose the family home and we're doing something, maybe there's some best interest duty in your favour.
Yeah.
But if it's purchasing a property at 9 or 10% with how many thousands of dollars worth of fees, it is just cheaper to rent, unfortunately, and continue to better yourself financially.
Yeah. And I think I'm probably the broker at Trilogy that's played around in that non-conforming space the most.
You are our low doc person.
Yes. And, there are times where I have seen situations where people genuinely are just terrible at managing money, and them, obtaining all of this debt and buying a property is probably not the best option for them until they sort themselves out a bit. But then on the flip side of that, I've seen people that we have helped and they've been the most fulfilling loans that I've done.
And they've simply just hit a hiccup.
Yeah.
Just a small blip.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that's kind of it. They're definitely the most common kind of issues that we occur. And again, all of them can be overcome just by being transparent and organised.
Yeah.
There's no judgment from any broker. And if a broker is judging your life choices, they're not the broker for you.
Yeah,
No,
switch
can't find a
brokers.
new broker.
Yeah, 100%. You should be able to be working with a professional that you can say all of these things to,
Yeah.
judgment-free, because, heck, we're not in a role to judge you. We're helping you, you know.
Absolutely. And like I said earlier, we've all got a common goal. It's a team thing.
Yeah.
We're trying to work towards it, and honesty is the best policy.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening this week as we harped on. We're a bit negative today, but the positive is we can work around pretty much anything, and that is for new clients, existing clients. We've done it time and time again. So I would like to say getting advice early is certainly the key takeaway here. If you do need any advice, Trilogy Funding is where you can find all three of us. David and Hope always love a chat, particularly Dave. He loves a chat in the window with the arm up. You know, you can visualise that. Hope's definitely someone who will happily talk at the desk, and then we all eavesdrop, which is good. But yeah, get in touch with us today. Trilogy Funding in Deakin, which is in Canberra for all of our non-Canberran listeners.
Yeah.
But otherwise, thank you for joining us here today.
All
Thanks,
right.
guys.
Thanks, Jess.
Jess.
Thanks, guys. Cheerio.
Bye.
Bye.